the family dinner where my mother-in-law finally said it out loud, she set down her wine and said, "Sweetheart, I know you're upset, but you signed the transfer. Your name is right there. Nobody forced you. If you just don't remember, you've been under a lot of stress that spring." 9 relatives looked at me with soft, terrible pity. My husband studied his plate, and I put a photocopy of a page on the table and said, "That's the notary's journal. From the day you say I signed, it has a thumbprint in it next to my name. I let that sit. It isn't my thumb. Let me back up." Because to understand how a woman ends up standing in a room, proving that her own thumbprint isn't hers, you have to understand the year they spent teaching me that I'd given away my house and simply forgot, and how close they came to making me believe it. My name is Adiz Yume. I'm 42 years old, and my in-laws forged my signature to remove me from the deed of a house I paid for with my own money. Then they spent a year explaining, patiently and lovingly, that I had signed it myself. This is the story of the year I nearly lost my mind, and the small, boring, legally required book that saved it. Let me tell you about the house. I bought it. That's the fact this whole story turns on, and the fact my in-laws spent a year making complicated. I bought that house with money I earned as a pharmacist over 11 years of night shifts and double shifts, and a decade of not spending. The down payment was mine, $140,000, saved by a woman who came to this country at 22 with nothing and worked like the devil was chasing her. My name was on the mortgage. My name was on the deed. When my husband Chaik and I married, I already owned that house outright in every way that mattered. He moved into it. That's worth saying plainly. I did not marry into a house. He married into mine. Now let me tell you about his family, because the Yumeis, his side, had a culture, and that culture was the door they walked through. They were a family that handled things. That's how they'd say it. Chaik's father had died young, and his mother Ngozi had raised 4 children and run everything, and the family had developed a strong, unquestioned habit. Mama handles the paperwork. Mama and Chaik's older brother, Emeka, who fancied himself the family's business mind, took care of legal things, official things, documents. It was framed as care, as competence, as Nigerians of a certain generation being organized in a way that had kept the family afloat. And when Chaik and I married, that culture extended to me, and I let it, and that is the choice I've had to forgive myself for, because there was always paperwork, insurance things, refinancing things, tax things, and the pattern was always the same. Emeka or Ngozi would say, "We're handling it, don't worry, just sign here." And a document would appear at a family dinner or in a stack, and I'd sign where the little flag was because they were family, because I was tired from a 12-hour shift, because Chaik said it was fine. Because that's what everyone did in that family, and being the one who reads everything makes you look like you don't trust the people who love you. I want to be very clear that this is not stupidity. Millions of people sign where the flag is. The system runs on trust. It only looks like stupidity from the other side of a betrayal. Here is what they did. At some point about 3 years into my marriage, during a stretch when there genuinely was a refinance in progress, a real one, with real documents, a real reason for papers to be flying around, a deed transfer was executed. A document conveying my interest in the house to Chaik and his mother jointly. It bore my signature. It was notarized. It was recorded with the county. And with that on paper, I stopped owning my own house. I didn't know for 2 years. I found out because of something stupid and small. I was pulling documents for a home equity application, and I saw the current deed, and my name wasn't on it, and Ngozi's was. I remember the specific physical sensation. I read it 4 times. I thought it was a clerical error. I laughed, actually a real laugh, because it was so obviously wrong. Let me tell you about the year that followed, because the theft was the beginning, not the story. I brought it to Chaik, expecting confusion and outrage. And he was uncomfortable in a way I didn't understand, and he said, "Oh, that was part of the refinance restructuring. Mom explained it, remember, for the tax thing." And I said no. I said, "Absolutely not. I have never signed away my house. I would remember signing away my house." And that's when the machine started. Ngozi was gentle about it. That's what made it so effective. She didn't rage or deny. She sympathized. "Ada, my darling, you signed it." I was there. Emeka was there. It was the spring you were doing all those extra shifts, and you were so tired, remember? We explained it and you signed. Nobody tricked you. Perhaps you didn't fully take it in, and I'm sorry for that. We should have made sure you understood. Do you see the shape of it? She didn't say you're lying. She said you were tired and you forgot. She handed me a version of events where nobody was a criminal, and I was merely exhausted and forgetful. It's such a generous story. And accepting it cost me only one thing, my house and my belief in my own mind. And Emeka produced the document. There it was, a deed transfer with my signature on it. It looked like my signature. Not perfect, but signatures aren't perfect. And it was notarized, which everyone knows means a real person watched you sign it and checked your ID, which means it happened, which means I signed it. Let me tell you what a year of that does. I started doubting myself. Genuinely. Because the evidence was there and my memory wasn't. I couldn't produce a countervailing memory of asterisk, not asterisk, signing something. Nobody can. How do you remember not doing a thing? I'd lie awake and think, was I that tired that spring? I was doing doubles. Did they explain it and I nodded through it? Did I sign a stack and not look? Let me give you the texture of it, because "they gaslit me" is a phrase people use so easily now that it stopped meaning anything, and I want you to feel the actual machinery. It was never a fight. That's the first thing. If they'd shouted at me, I'd have shouted back and been fine. Instead, it was concern. There was a Sunday, maybe 4 months in, when I brought it up again, carefully, reasonably, with the deed printed out, and Ngozi didn't even look at the paper. She looked at asterisk me asterisk, and she said with enormous tenderness, "Ada, sit down, are you sleeping?" And I said, "What does that have to do with it?" And she said, because Chike tells me you're not sleeping, and I remember when I lost my husband, I lost 6 months. Could not tell you one thing that happened. The mind protects itself, my darling. There is no shame in it. She took my hand. She has warm hands. You are working yourself to death in that hospital, and you are grieving your grandmother, and you are angry at yourself for signing something you don't remember. And instead of being angry at yourself, you are being angry at us. And I forgive you for it. I do. I forgive you for it. Do you understand what that does? I came in with a document and left having been forgiven. She turned my evidence into a symptom. Every fact I brought became further proof of the things she was diagnosing. And then it got into my life. Mecca started asking Chike in front of me whether I'd been to see anybody. My sister-in-law began treating me with the exaggerated gentleness you use with the frattle. At a birthday party, a cousin took me aside and said, kindly, you know they're not against you, right? They're worried. That's the moment I remember most clearly, standing in a garden holding a paper plate, being told by someone I liked that my family was worried about me, and feeling the ground go soft, because what if they're right? 9 people cannot all be gaslighting you. That's insane. That's a conspiracy theory. Reasonable people don't believe conspiracy theories about their own family. And here's the cruelest mechanic, the one I still haven't fully forgiven. They made my exhaustion into evidence. I was tired. I'd always been tired. I'm a pharmacist who works nights. I've been tired since 2009. And they took the most ordinary fact about my life and turned it into the reason I couldn't trust my own mind. My competence, my endurance, the 11 years of double shifts that Asterisk bought the house Asterisk, all got reclassified as the thing that made me unreliable. There was a night I stood in my own kitchen, the kitchen I paid for, and could not remember what I was certain about. Not the deed, anything. I stood there holding a glass and thought, if I could sign away a house and not remember what else. Did I lock the door? Did I take my pills? Was I like this at work? Was I like this at work? That's when it stops being about a deed. When you no longer trust your own mind, you don't just lose an argument. You lose the instrument you'd use to have one. The family, of course, all knew the story. Poor Ada is confused about the paperwork and is being difficult. Ngozi told it with such kindness that I looked unhinged for objecting. And every time I raised it, I got the pity look, the soft, awful one that says we love you and you're not well Asterisk. And Chike, my husband, went along, not aggressively, worse, passively. He'd say, Ada, please, can we not do this again? He'd say, it's just paperwork, it doesn't change anything. This is still your home. And every time he said Asterisk, this is still your home, it was a small confirmation that it wasn't, legally, and that he'd rather live in the lie than fight his mother. I asked him once directly, one of the last times I had the strength, do you think I signed it? And he waited too long, maybe 2 seconds, and then he said, I think it doesn't matter. That's not an answer. I've thought about those 2 seconds for years. In 2 seconds, a man can decide to keep his mother and lose his wife, and never once have to say a single false word. Let me tell you about the midpoint, because it's the closest I've ever come to losing myself. About 10 months in, I decided I'd signed it. I want to say that plainly, because I think people don't understand how gaslighting actually works. It doesn't work by convincing you the sky is green. It works by exhausting you. After 10 months of one person's memory against 4 people's certainty, and a notarized document, I did the arithmetic that any reasonable person does. What's more likely, that my whole family conspired to forge a deed and a notary stamp? Or that I signed a paper while exhausted and don't remember? The second one is more likely. Obviously. It's Asterisk, so Asterisk much more likely, so I accepted it. I told Chike I was sorry for making a year of trouble. I remember the relief on his face, and I remember how good it felt to stop being the difficult one. I actually slept that night. And I want to tell you the specific thing that pulled me back, because it wasn't courage. It was a receipt. 3 weeks after I surrendered, I was cleaning out a drawer and found an old work calendar. And idly, genuinely idly, not investigating, just curious about that terrible spring, I looked up the date on the deed transfer. March 14th. I was in Abuja on March 14th. I was in Nigeria. My grandmother had died, and I had flown home, and I was 6,000 miles away for 11 days. And the deed transfer says I appeared before a notary in this county on March 14th and signed a document with my own hand. I sat on the floor of my bedroom holding a work calendar, and I started laughing, and then I couldn't stop, and then I was crying, because for 10 months these people had made me believe I was losing my mind. And the whole time, the Asterisk whole time, I had been on another continent. They'd been so careless, because they'd never imagined I'd check. Why would they? They'd already won. I'd already agreed I signed it. Let me tell you about the notary, because this is where it turned from my word into arithmetic. Here's what most people don't know, and what my in-laws clearly didn't. Notaries keep a journal. In many states, it's legally required. Every notarization gets an entry, date, document type, the signer's name, the ID presented, and its number, sometimes a thumbprint, and the signer's own signature in the journal itself. It's a boring little book that sits in a drawer, and it exists precisely because someday somebody will say I never signed that. I hired a lawyer, a real one, mine, not the family's, a woman named Patience Akanjo who specialized in property fraud. And Patience did what I hadn't known was possible. She identified the notary from the stamp and commission number on the recorded deed, and she went and got the journal entry. And it was all there. The entry for March 14th. Signature in the journal that was not mine, similar, but not mine, and crucially Asterisk different from the signature on the deed itself, because forgers don't practice for the book they don't know exists. An ID number recorded that did not match my driver's license number, and a thumbprint. A thumbprint that was not my thumb. Patience said something I'll never forget. She said, Adiz, I want you to understand what you're holding. This isn't a family dispute anymore. Forging a signature to convey real property and inducing or committing a false notarization is not a squabble about paperwork. It's deed fraud, and it's a felony, and the notary is now in a great deal of trouble too. Which means the notary is going to be very interested in explaining exactly who was standing in front of them on March 14th. Because their entire livelihood now depends on it. And here's the second thing, which mattered as much, the money. Because while they'd been busy forging a signature, they'd never touched the payment trail asterisk. 11 years of my income, my down payment from my account. Free mortgage payment from my account. $140,000 of documented, traceable, unarguable money from a woman who worked nights. Stolen the deed and left the entire financial history of the house standing in my name, because it never occurred to them that anyone would ask who actually paid for this. Let me tell you about the notary, whose name was Douglas Reyes, because he is the reason I know exactly what happened. Confronted professionally, through patience, with his own journal in front of him, Douglas did the math on his career in about 4 seconds. What he said was this: a woman came in on March 14th with Emeka Yume. She presented ID. He didn't look closely, because Emeka was a regular customer who brought him lots of business, and because the woman had the right paperwork and knew the right details and Emeka vouched for her. She was not me. She was, we would later establish, a cousin. It found someone with a passing resemblance and my general age, and had her sign my name twice, with Emeka standing there vouching. It's not a sophisticated crime. It's a stupid, arrogant crime, which is what most family crimes are, because they weren't worried about being caught by the law. They were only worried about being caught by me, and they'd already handled me, because they'd spent a year convincing me I was the problem. Let me tell you about the dinner. Ngozi called it, in a way, a family dinner, 9 relatives, and she'd been telling everyone I'd come round after my year of confusion. And she said it out loud, gently, for everyone's benefit. Sweetheart, I know you're upset. But you signed the transfer. Your name is right there. Nobody forced you. Maybe you just don't remember you'd been under a lot of stress that spring. The pity look in stereo from 9 faces, and I put a photocopy on the table. That's the notary's journal. From March 14th, the day you say I signed, it has a thumbprint in it next to my name. I let it sit. It isn't my thumb. Nobody moved. Notaries keep journals, I said to the room. It's the law. Free notarization. The date, the ID presented, and its number, a signature in the book, sometimes a print. It exists exactly for the situation where someone says I never signed that. I laid out the next page. The ID number recorded on March 14th isn't my license number. The signature in the journal isn't mine, and it doesn't even match the one on the deed, because whoever forged it didn't know the book existed. I looked at Emeka, and the thumbprint isn't mine. Then I put down the work calendar and my passport. On March 14th, I was in Abuja, burying my grandmother, 6,000 miles away, for 11 days, with a stamp in my passport and a boarding pass and about 40 relatives who saw me there. I looked at my mother-in-law. So you're right, Mama. I don't remember signing it. I don't remember it because I was on another continent, and for 1 year you have all sat in this room and looked at me with pity and told me I was too tired to remember my own hand. And then the part I'd been holding. The notary is Douglas Reyes. He's been interviewed. His journal is a legal record and his commission is on the line, so he was extremely forthcoming about who actually walked into his office that day with the paperwork. I looked at Emeka. He described you, Emeka. And a woman who was not me, using my name, presenting an ID with a number that isn't mine, while you stood there and vouched for her. Emeka stood up and left the room. He simply left. 9 people watched him go, and that was the confession. Here is how it ended. The deed came back to me. That part was the most straightforward, because a conveyance executed by forgery is void, not merely voidable. It's not a bad deal I made. It's a document that never had legal existence. Patience had it undone, and the recorded title corrected, and the house was mine again on paper as it had always been in fact and in money. And it stopped being a family matter. Deed fraud is a crime, and false notarization is a crime, and a notary's journal is exactly the kind of evidence that makes such cases very simple. I'm not going to detail the outcomes for Emeka, or for Ngozi, or for the cousin who signed my name. It's my family's private grief, and there's nothing entertaining in it. I'll say that they were real, and that I was the one who set them in motion, and that I've never regretted it, but that setting your husband's family on fire is not a triumphant feeling, whatever anyone tells you. It's just quiet and cold and correct. Douglas Reyes lost his commission. He'd been careless, not malicious. He notarized a fraud because a regular customer vouched, and he didn't look at the ID properly. That's it. That's the whole crime, and it cost him his livelihood. I don't feel good about it. But I think about the fact that his little boring book, the thing he kept dutifully for years and probably resented, is the only reason I'm not a woman who gave away her own house and forgot. He was careless enough to notarize it and dutiful enough to record it, and the second thing saved me from the first. Now the hard part. My marriage did not survive, and I want to be precise about why, because it isn't what people assume. Chike didn't forge anything. He didn't plan it. When it all came out, he was genuinely shattered, and I believe, that he did not know on March 14th what his mother and brother had done. But he found out. Somewhere in that year, he worked it out, and he chose to say nothing. He looked at his wife, coming apart, doubting her own mind, apologizing to a room full of people for a year of confusion, and he decided that his mother's protection was worth his wife's sanity. He let me apologize. That's the thing I couldn't get past. He sat at that table and watched me say sorry for making trouble about a house I'd paid for with 11 years of night shifts, and he felt relieved. He said all the true things afterward. He said he was a coward, which was accurate. He said he'd been raised to never cross his mother and hadn't known how. He said he'd spend the rest of his life making it right. And I believed all of it, and I left anyway because I finally understood the arithmetic. In the moment his wife's mind was on one side of the scale and his mother's comfort was on the other, he'd chosen. Not with a lie, with silence, for a year. And once you know how someone weighs you, you can't unknow it. You can forgive it. You just can't build a house on it. I kept the house. I'm in it right now. My name is on the deed, singular, where it has always belonged. And I have never once in the years since walked past the county recorder's website without a small, unhealthy urge to look it up and confirm I'm still there. That's a thing they gave me that I won't get rid of. For a year, my in-laws told me I'd signed away the house I bought with my own money, and I nearly believed them, because gaslighting doesn't work by convincing you of an absurdity. It works by exhausting you until you do the arithmetic and conclude that the likelier story is the one where you're the problem. One person's memory against four people's certainty, and a notarized document isn't a fair fight. It isn't even a fight. They forged my hand. They found a woman to be me for 4 minutes. They stood in a notary's office and swore I was there. But they were only thinking about me. That was their whole mistake. They were so focused on managing the one witness who mattered, the one they'd already broken, that they never thought about the ones who don't care about family at all. Little book in a drawer, kept by a bored man because the law says he must, recording a thumbprint that wasn't mine. A stamp in a passport, 6,000 miles away. 11 years of a pharmacist's paychecks, moving in a straight, boring, documented line from my nights into my house. None of them loved me. That's why they saved me. My family was very good at handling people. They never learned to handle the things that don't have feelings, the records, the prints, the dates, the money. And those things sat in their drawers all year patient and unmoved. All 9 people looked at me with pity and told me I was too tired to remember my own name. I remembered my name. It was on the deed the whole time. They just had to send a stranger to sign it because I wasn't there.